So the ovary, and remember in lecture is where you have to worry about functions of stuff, not for lab. Ovary is where we make our eggs. Now when we get to the fallopian tube, also called the uterine tube or the oviduct, it starts off with this part that looks like Ronald McDonald's wig or something. And then it goes, and so in the fallopian tube, that's where fertilization happens. And it's got four regions for it, 5 regions. I put intramural in parentheses because it means within the wall, so it's within the wall of the uterus. You can't see that on a model because it's inside the wall. That's why it's in parentheses, because I can never ask it. Isthmus is where it gets very narrow and constricts, and you can't really tell that it gets very narrow and constricts right before it goes into the wall. So I likely wouldn't ask isthmus, but I talk about it in lab because it is a lecture concept that we have to worry about. But isthmus, there's like bodies of water called like the Isthmus of Hormuz, and it's about how it's like a narrow little place, but it gets very narrow there. So the parts you have to worry about me doing then are ampulla, infundibulum, or fimbriae. So I could just ask the fallopian tube, or I can say what's the region of this structure. So the place where fertilization actually happens, like so most of this color here would be the ampulla. Just put a check to make sure I talk about it. Like the red, except for the part that looks like fingers. So where it broadens, that right there is the infundibulum, and then the finger-like projections coming down. So it would be like my hand's the infundibulum, this would be the ampulla, and then these would be the fimbriae. And so when you release the egg from the ovary, the fimbriae are moving and they create a current that like moves the egg inside of the fallopian tube. And then fertilization takes place in the ampulla. And then the thing moves down into the uterus where we implant it in the endometrium. But you worry about 3 regions that could be asked. Fimbriae are the fingers. Then we have infundibulum, which is most of the red. Then we have ampulla, and I would not ask isthmus or intramural. So that's the uterine tube. Broad ligament, only thing I could ask it on would be this. So maybe I do both. Maybe if I decide to do this model, I do both ligaments. And so then suspensory ligament, I have it listed, but we can't see it on any model. But the ovarian ligament, it says it connects the ovary to the uterus. So, broad, and then the ovarian. And the ovary, and the fact that it's touching the ovary should make it easy to remember that that's the ovarian. Here is the ovarian on this one. But if I'm going to do the ligaments, then this model's out if I'm doing the ligaments. And that's all I use this model for. Okay, so ligaments. Then we get to the uterus, our little baby oven. And so the uterus sits on top of the bladder. So often when people get pregnant, they have some pee and stuff going on. Or they're having to pee a little bit more. And or feeling the urge to at least. Fundus is like this end, the neck, cervix, and then everything in between is body. The fornix is this region that indents on either side of the cervix. So the fornix is that indentation right there. That is fornix. So it's in the same region as the cervix, but it's like the space outside of the cervix. So in labor, the cervix dilates. So that's the fornix. Then we have 3 layers of the wall of the uterus. So see this little thin layer right there? That's the endometrium. That builds up every month, because of estrogen and progesterone. It builds up every month. And then if you put a baby in there, it stays big. If you don't put a baby in there, you shed it as part of your menstrual cycle. So it's really thin here because this model's not pregnant. And then most of this is myometrium. Most of it's muscle. And then you have perimetrium on the outside. So if I ask, if I want, a peri means around. And so if I'm going to ask, if I want one of those, I'd say identify the layer of the indicated structure. So like I said, endometrium, and we'll see this when we cover it in lecture, how it builds up because of estrogen and progesterone that makes us put blood vessels and glycogen in it. So that's that. Okay, then we have the vagina, and even though urethra is not asked, shown on this, if I ask urethra, because urinary is also something we have to worry about, if I ask urethra, it's going to be on the female model to make sure you know the vagina and the urethra and the difference. You know, so the urethra is more anterior, and the vagina, of course, should be bigger. You know, it's like the bigger road. Okay, so then we get to the vulva. So collectively, the female external genitalia is called the vulva or the pudendum. The vestibule, I really don't think I could ask it. Like, I don't really think I could ask vestibule, because how do I ask that inner space? So then we have the labia minora and the labia majora. So inner one, minora, outer one, majora. Then we get to, what's this boomerang?
The
Clitoris. And then the prepuce is a little fold of skin that's like covering it, also called the clitoral hood. Don't call it the clitoral hood. And then mons pubis, pubic mound, would be up here, and I'm not going to ask mons pubis. There's a thing on the handout, it says microscope slides. We're not going to look at microscope slides on this. So we're not going to look at the microscope slides for the female reproductive. We'll just look